What's up, guys? It's your girl Rivah, and I am back again with another video. If you're new to this channel, hi, my name is Rivah. It's very nice to meet you. Before we get into this video, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys give this video a thumbs up. And as I always say, make sure you guys leave your comments in the comment section down below. Doesn't matter how you feel about this video, we all want to talk about it. Also, if you're not following me on Instagram, follow my Instagram. It's at RIVAH_JORDON. And we're going to go ahead and jump right into this video.
You've counseled so many numerous people throughout the years in your practice, and probably just so many different young adults, especially young men. What would you say from your personal experience has been one of the most consistent issues that you see plaguing young men and holding them back from all your years of experience?
Well, one of them is wrong attitude towards education. And, because it's easy, and like I said, temperamentally, I was disinclined to enjoy school, especially from grade 7 through grade 12, especially
Why do you say
junior
that?
high. Well, all my friends were kind of delinquent types in some ways, and so they acted up, and so did I, and I was pretty mouthy. But also, it was too slow for me. Like when I took language arts in grade 8, I had read the whole year's books in I think it was the first day, but it was certainly the first week. And so it just bored, I was just bored to death. So that wasn't so good. And, it can be a bit infantilizing because of the rule structure. Like I said, a lot of my friends, they just weren't going to put up their hand when they wanted to go to the bathroom anymore, and they were just done with that. But one of the things young men aren't taught properly, and I mean even at the age of, let's say, 11, young, is like, there is nothing that will make you more powerful than your words. And so if you think that reading and writing is for pansies and dimwits, or teachers' pets, because they get in less trouble in school, let's say, you're seriously misinformed. And so, I talk to people like Jocko Willink, and Jocko's as tough a guy as you could ever hope to encounter about literacy, and a number of other people too who are also seriously tough guys. Congressman Dan, what's Dan's last name?
Dan Crenshaw.
Crenshaw, yeah. Sorry about that. I have a bit of memory issues with that sort of thing at the moment. Yeah, well, he's as tough as a bloody boot, that guy, and both those characters, and Rex Murphy, who's one of Canada's outstanding journalists, he's so damn tough, it's crazy. And they all know perfectly well that literacy is a huge part of what's made them unstoppable. And you don't take that lightly. It's really serious, and it's a failing of our education system that literacy isn't marketed properly to young men. It's like, straighten up, speak properly, write, learn to write. Why? Because that's the same as learning to think. And why should you think? Well, because you won't do as many stupid things, and
other people won't have to think for you as well. And I think what he said about being in school and not being challenged enough, I think this is where the parents come in, because it's super important to be involved in your kids' schoolwork and their studies, finding out what's going on with them, because sometimes people literally bash their kids, or the teacher will be like, oh, the kid just talks too much. And it's finding out that reason why, because sometimes, exactly, your mind is not challenged enough, and you just find things to do with your time. And maybe you should be going to AP classes. Maybe you should be in honors classes, because maybe this is not, maybe you are on a different level than the work that we're giving you in school. So maybe you do need to be challenged a bit more, so that your mind can be stretched to think a little bit harder and think a little bit more, so that you have to actually process the information instead of spending time literally chilling, hanging out with your friends, doing nothing.
Your horizons will widen. And then too, when you need to entice people along your journey, hopefully somewhere good, you'll be able to do it because you'll be compelling. And there's something deeply pathological about the way our society markets literacy to young men in particular, because, well, partly we just won't allow for the let's say, the marketing association between toughness and dangerousness and literacy. There's something wrong about that, we think, some weird way, and it's just, that's wrong. It's like, sure, you should be physically tough, and you should be tough in your temperament,
Right.
as well as having the capacity for play and compassion. That has to be developed too. But that's not enough. And I don't care how tough you are physically, you're nowhere near as tough as you would be if you were physically tough and really literate. And then you're an unstoppable force, and hopefully for good. And that's a much tougher battle than, being tough for your own idiotic, selfish ends. That's just pathetic. And so, and I just don't understand. We've developed a writing program, which is called Essay, which teaches people how to write while they use it. It's a word processor, but it teaches people how to write as you use it. We built that into the program itself. And I really want to market it to young men and say, look, get your words together and then see what you can do. And don't be thinking that that's somehow beneath you. That just means you're stupid, that you think that. You don't know anything. You think that. It's wrong. And you're limiting yourself so much you can't even imagine it. You might not even figure it out till you're 60, and then it's too late. So read, write, think.
Yeah.
Right.
And another one is research. Because not everybody, it's important to read, to write, to think, and it's also important to do like your own research in different ways as well. Like literally YouTube has a plethora of knowledge that people can use that they just don't.
That's what we need.
What's good, everybody? We're going to take a quick pause from this week's amazing episode to talk to you guys about our new amazing Partners short form. As Dr. Peterson said...
Okay, I'm just going to pass through this really quick, guys, just because I know that we're here for the conversation.
You won't regret it. And let's get back to this amazing episode. Oh, that's great. I was also... I taught middle school, so the 13-year-old rowdy people that you guys were, those are my classrooms. I taught 7th grade, and so one of the things I found was that a lot of the students who couldn't express themselves verbally or written, one of the ways they expressed themselves was through violence. And I think what you talked about by the importance of education and importance of being able to articulate your ideas, be able to read is one of the things that I've seen with a lot of the students that were misbehaving in my classroom, because one of the biggest frustrations was not being able to express themselves, especially not being able to be in an environment where they can succeed academically. So what do you think schools should be doing to be able to help young men do better at this instead of falling behind at the race that they've been falling behind at today?
Well, I think a fair bit of it is going to have to do with a proper explanation about why they need to learn to write and read. And I also think that our schools, led by the faculties of education at universities, which is an enterprise that's become corrupted almost beyond belief. We should make much more of an effort to ensure that kids are unbelievably proficient readers. And a lot of that is going to involve early automatization of letter and phoneme and syllable and word recognition. So, because what happens is when you teach a child to read, first of all, you teach them the alphabet and the sounds. And we have an alphabetic language, thank God, because it makes things much simpler. And so you teach them the letters and then the 2-letter combinations and then the 3-letter combinations. Then they can sound out syllables, and then they get words. But it isn't until you can read phrases automatically at a glance that you can read for content and pleasure. And so a lot of kids get stuck, especially if they don't come from particularly literate homes where all of this is sort of taught, maybe starting at, 12 months when they're first dragging a book around and becoming familiar with the book as an object, right, before they even learn to read. You got to get kids through that automatization phase, and that requires intense mass practice. And that's not that intrinsically interesting, right? But if you can get them to the point where they can read for content, well, then it starts to become interesting, just as interesting, let's say, as going to a movie or perhaps playing a video game. And so that has to be made an absolute priority. And if the faculties of education were doing their job, they would have produced technology to solve that problem for virtually every child, because it is only a matter of practice. Smarter kids will learn faster, but with enough practice, pretty much everybody is going to get there. So, and then there's the marketing issue. It's like, well, why should you read? Well, do you want to be stupid? Do you want to be stupid? What happens when you're stupid? You walk into walls because you don't see them. And if someone comes along who's more educated than you, more literate and cannier,
they know how to put you in a box. Exactly. And this goes. I like the way that he's phrasing this whole entire situation and this whole conversation, just because of the fact that, like, literally, like, you have to take the chains off of your mind. You have to be able to expand your mind, your thought process, yes, your vocabulary, and all of these things. Because I know exactly where he was going with this. Is that you will definitely, and you can be as strong as you want, but you will definitely encounter somebody who, if they have more wisdom than you, can defeat you in different ways and different avenues. So it's definitely important to have knowledge for yourself, research, know things, read, um, um, you know, as well as being physically strong, being able to, defend yourself, and all of these things. All of these things are super important, but they all make you a collectively whole human being.
they'll just, you'll lose, man. You'll lose. And you'll lose too because you can't think properly. So you won't aim at the right things, and you won't be informed by the great individuals of the past. And you need that. We're historical creatures. This isn't optional. So part of it has to be marketing, for lack of a better word. It's not really that. It's an explanation. Why be literate? Because it helps you become who you could be. It helps you move out into the world and have your great adventure, and to bring people along. God only knows what you can do if you've got your words lined up properly. And young men would listen to that if someone who knew what they were talking about was telling them that.
Right. True.
As you found out.
So what do you think? What do you think?
No,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you if like in regards to the problem of encouragement, what do you? Because to me, I feel as though so many of the societal message is always the bumbling idiot, Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin, and a lot of men don't have encouraging messages to be able to start them on a journey to success.
It's really, if you're afraid of male power, let's say, crippling them is one solution.
Yeah.
Now, it's not a good solution. And that's going to happen if you think of the patriarchy as a tyrant. And look, there's reasons to think that, So I was watching this movie, King Arthur, by Guy Ritchie, and when the new king, young King Arthur, takes his sword, he has flashbacks to his evil uncle killing his father. And it's so terrible that he can't hold on to the sword. And I thought, well, what's Ritchie doing there? That's the case for all of us, isn't it? Because when we look into the past and we see our evil uncles, it's just a complete bloody catastrophic mess, isn't it? Slavery and genocide and war and oppression and that's on all of us, isn't it? And it's always lurking there in the background. And so is that male power? Well, yes, in some ways. I mean, if you don't give a man a sword, he can't use a sword, right? So not giving him a sword is one way of making sure he's peaceful, but it's not the optimal way. And besides, if you cripple men, they become far more dangerous. They become dangerous in an terrible underground fashion. Of course, the same is exactly true if you cripple women, but we're speaking particularly of boys, because I suppose there's an education crisis among boys and young men. Well, you want to encourage that power because it's actually a tremendous force for good if it's brought under control. And so, but that's a hard thing to get right. And it also requires a lot of trust and work on the part of women because they want to, it's like Beauty and the Beast, right? Because Beauty entices that beast who's real, but uncivilized and dangerous. She sort of entices him into becoming fully developed. And that's what a woman has to do when she, has that work project that she marries or has a long-term relationship with. But it's much better to encourage with faith and trust and say, I saw this really with my son a lot.
I love the way that he said that about women having to encourage the good um, within their spouse, because a lot of times, there's women who are married to men and married, and they're not. They're encouraging the bad. They're encouraging you to do this because of maybe a certain way they want to live, or they encourage you to do that or that. But like having someone in your corner who's literally, um, you know, enticing you, as he said, to do the right thing is super important and a powerful thing to have as well. But I generally, the fact that he said about slavery is such a big deal because of the fact that like that's what the okay so people were brought to a place that they didn't even know the language, they didn't understand how they were speaking, the verbiage, they didn't understand any of that, and they were reading these things and had all these books and they had all this knowledge, as he said, passed from like their ancestors, that they could read and know all of these things from this place because it's in the language that they know, and they were using certain things to be able to control the people who were there with them. But again, it goes back to the knowledge that they had, and not that the other people that were enslaved were not knowledgeable, because they definitely were. They definitely had a lot of wisdom. However, being that they were using their own language and even the thought process, like to be able to do something like that and take people away from where they come from, and like literally like that they don't understand certain things, that, and using it for bad to literally keep these people in a certain way. Definitely one of the first huge um, visions of mind control that we have literally have ever seen in our time.
With my son because he is an ornery little cuss.
So my point, sorry, I just want to finish the thought. So my point is that you have to take the chains off of your mind and know things for yourself, research things for yourself, so that no one can put you in a box, because you might be free outwardly, but your mind may still be locked in chains.
He's quite low in agreeableness, my son, and he loved the word no, and he really worried that word to death. And he was quite he pushed limits, and it was fun to watch because he was such a little guy. Like, I'll give you an example of this. It's quite funny. When he was about 8 months old, he wanted to use the spoon. And it's like, good kid, so you want to use the spoon, and you got to learn, and so on. And then when he had the spoon, there was no damn way you were going to take that spoon from him. He was going to put up quite the bloody fuss if you were going to take that spoon. But he was also really inclined to play. And so after he'd had the spoon for about 2 weeks, he would spend way more time playing than eating. And that was okay, not really, because then he would be hungry, and then he would be crabby, and then he wouldn't have a nap, and then he would upset my wife because he was crabby because he didn't have a nap, and things were just degenerating. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to take the spoon from him because he isn't eating enough. And I fought with him. That's the fight I had with my son. I probably fought with him for 3 hours before he would let me feed him with that spoon. And it was so interesting to watch him. It was like, I'm not opening my mouth. And he's like 9 months old, and I had to poke him in the chest, poke, 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 poke. And then he'd get mad and go, and then I could feed him a little bit of food. And I wasn't angry, because I knew I could outweight it. 9-month-old, for God's sake, but 3 hours, and it was really hard on my wife. She had to leave the room, and because it took some conflict. Well, that's his character. He was a tough little kid and inclined to push boundaries and to challenge dominance hierarchies. And, there is an element of that is challenging and difficult, but he became unbelievably diplomatic from worrying that line, And my wife did a lovely job of shaping and molding that and encouraging it, because she wasn't afraid of that, and she really loved him. And so my wife likes men so sort of deeply. She had her elements of distrust that were part of familial baggage, and everybody has that, but fundamentally she liked men and she likes to be with men. So we had that going for us. But we're afraid of math.
Okay, now that comment that he said is powerful in more ways than one. His wife liked the nature of a man, so she nurtured that in him as a child and helped him to develop even the factors that he is as a grown man because of her not trying to stifle that within him. And on the contrary, you have a lot of women who don't like the nature of a man and change those elements within their sons because of the men that they have encountered or whatever the case may be, and change those strong elements. So then that's when you have these men who grow up with their ultimate allegiance to women and to this and to that, and they get their heart trampled on. And all of these things because that masculinity that's supposed to be there was defeated by the woman that they love first. That's powerful.
Huh. Women who've had bad experiences with men can't distinguish competence from tyranny,
Mm.
and so they reject the tyranny, or they'll marry second-rate men because then they can rule the roost, which is a very bad solution.
Yeah.
But
No,
see how he said second-rate men because that's also the kind of men that they're raising.
it's funny because what you describe is what I've seen a lot of, and one of the things that happens is that, like you said, men can use their strength to, build up cities, and also they can use their strength to tear them down. And so, what people want to do is, okay, let's just remove their strength altogether. And I meet a lot of young men, and you probably experienced this numerous of times throughout your work, where I meet a lot of young men whose mom wanted to make them the anti-man. You're not going to be like your dad. You're not going to be like this guy. You're not going to be this. And these men end up having no backbone. They end up having no ability to speak their mind, and they become these prototypical nice guys. And so, what has been your experience with dealing with these men who have these nice guy tendencies, who can't stand up for themselves, who their moms raised them to be this type of anti-man?
yeah, well, sometimes that can also be temperamental, right? Because if a man happens to be high in agreeableness, this is also true of women. They're much more conflict averse, and and they're nicer in their temperament. So if you get an agreeable boy, let's say, who also has a doting mother, then you might have that problem. There's other ways of having that problem, but that's one way. Well, when I saw people like that in therapy, they were often resentful and angry and passive aggressive, and getting in their own way, often to spite whoever was doting on them, let's say. And so the first thing I would do is listen to why they were there, and then start to unpack that anger, and then start to work with the individual to figure out how to voice that. You have to separate out what's old history and useless, and what's just narcissism and infantilism from genuine concerns. But if you listen to people, they will sort that out for themselves. That's one of the cool things about being a therapist, is if you listen, that happens more or less by itself. And then, as a behavioral psychologist, maybe someone like that would need a raise, but would be afraid to ask their boss. Well, we just practice that. It's like, okay, well, first of all, why should your boss give you a raise? Like, there might be good reasons. He doesn't want to lose you because you're a good worker. Well, are you a good worker? And if you weren't, well, we'd solve that problem.
Right.
Put yourself in a position where you deserve the raise. Okay, well, now you're too timid or you're too unskilled, because you have to differentiate those two things too, because some people who can't stand up for themselves actually don't know how, whereas others are afraid, and some are both. And so you have to figure out, so some of it's skill training. Well, how do you actually ask your boss for a raise? Well, you tell the truth. That's the best way. You say, look, here's what I'm doing. Here's why it's really useful for you. It looks like I'm somewhat underpaid in this role. That's demotivating me, possibly. I also have other options. I think I need, 15% more, and I'm interested in moving up. And here's what I'll do for you if you do that. And so, think about it. And then if your boss doesn't do that, and all that's true, well, then you should be assertive enough to find another job. Right. Or maybe you look for another job before you even ask for the raise. Put your CV together, right? Update it so you're not afraid to look for another job. All this is strategic thinking. That was another thing that was really fun about clinical work. Most of my clients They doubled or tripled their salaries within 3 or 4 years.
Oh
They
wow.
worked at it. This wasn't nothing. This was major league strategic planning, and that was true for women and men. So and that's very fun to watch that happen.
No, that makes
Strategize,
sense.
think clearly about it, right, and get your act together. And you got to see what's getting in your way. So maybe you're afraid to ask your boss for a raise because if he says no, you'd have to look for a job, and you don't have your resume or CV updated. And the reason you don't have it updated is because you're embarrassed about it's the lacks in it, and you don't want to face the lacks because then you'd have to see how you didn't get educated properly because you were useless, and you'd have to take steps to rectify that. And like, it's a real mess down there.
It's so okay. So hearing this from a psychologist, a therapist, is to know that the most important thing to develop in all the things that we talk about in relationships and like life and literally everything is your mind. Your mind is so powerful and you have to get it squared away. You have to get it straight and cleared out. You have to be able to think logically, think rationally in all the things that you are doing, all the things that you delve in, because of the fact that like there's so many opportunities that await you if you get your mind clear. A lot of people that you see that are super successful, super wealthy, all of these things, their mind processes in a certain manner. Their mind definitely thinks in a certain way. That's why they're able to pass those mind blocks and to achieve things just because of the way that their mental is set up.
The reasons you're not asking. So we'd lay that all out and then say, well, you're embarrassed about your resume. Well, update it and let's take a look at it. Okay, well, here's some holes and they're not good. What could you do to fix those? And then you break it down into small steps, right? Implementable steps, because that's very practical. So that's a good thing to know. If you have your sights set on a goal, you'll move towards it if you break the steps down small enough so that even someone as useless as you will do it. And that also requires a fair bit of humility, because what you might find, especially if you're avoiding something, is that the step you are actually willing to take is so small that you're embarrassed to admit it to yourself, so you won't take any steps at all. Well, that's completely counterproductive. And the reason that's not proper thinking, let's say, or productive thinking, is that, well, small steps get bigger real fast.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter where you start. If you're doubling your utility every few weeks, who cares where you start? It starts to take off real quick.
Yep.
So you don't want to be embarrassed. You don't want to be so embarrassed by where you are that it stops you from becoming who you could be. And that's tough. It can be that's real tough. I'm not making light of that. I see exactly why people avoid, but it's not a good solution. So for assertiveness, that's what you do. And maybe you practice how people, maybe they're afraid to ask a woman for her phone number, and so you practice that, and then you use exposure training. It's like, well, go out and practice that. Say hi to a pretty woman when you pass her on the street. That's your task for this week, and see how you do. See how you respond. See if you can do that. See if you avoid, and if you do avoid, see what you're thinking when you avoid. And see if you made eye contact, and if you were standing up reasonably straight, like a reasonable human being.
Like a reasonable human being. Wow, this conversation was so good on so many levels. I feel like a lot of information was unpacked in literally just 20 minutes. I genuinely want to know if you guys like this video. I want you guys to leave your comments in the comment section down below with all of your opinions, your thoughts, however you felt about this conversation. I want to hear it. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys give this video a thumbs up. And if you're not following me on Instagram, my Instagram is at RIVAH_JORDON. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you guys so very much. And I will see you guys in the next video.